Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of Body and Soul. In today's edition, we are going to talk about the psychological impact of the disease. To what extent a patient who is suffering from a certain disease could have a psychological problem. That would be our topic for discussion for today with our dear guest in the studio, Dr. Yasser Yusri, a psychiatrist. Hello, Dr. Yasser.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being our guest for today.
Thank you.
Dr. Yasser, many people who are having certain diseases, maybe some of them are dangerous or fatal or quite serious, and others might not be that dangerous but could be painful or annoying, of course. To what extent this could have a negative repercussion on the psychological health of the patient?
Well, we always say that the body and mind are connected. It means that when the body is affected by any kind of distortions or disorder, the psychological aspect of the personality of the patient himself will be affected as well, and vice versa. When the person is suffering from any psychiatric or psychological disorder, to high probability it may affect his physical condition. So almost all the physical or organic diseases will affect the psychological state of the patient.
Indeed, but to what extent doctors now, the physicians, are aware of the issues that some patients could have psychological problems that they should be dealing with, not only with the disease itself or with the problem that, the physical problem that the patient is suffering from?
Actually, we have a problem here in Egypt that some physicians do not aware of the psychological issues concerning the organic disease, so that they may ignore or dismiss the psychological problems the patient is suffering from, and that will in turn affect the physical health and the improvement of the disease itself, if we ignored the psychological aspect of the patient. So we lack of knowledge about this case and these cases. So many cases we ignore, and we ignore referring them to the psychiatrist to properly assess the patient for the psychological effect of the organic disease.
Dr. Yasser, how dangerous it is to ignore the emotional impact and the psychological impact of such a disease on the patient? Because sometimes we do ignore the psychological part here in order to have a speedy cure for, or to be more concerned with the physical issue or the main disease that the patient is suffering from. So how dangerous is it?
The most important drawback of ignoring the psychological issue of the organic disease is the delay of recovery or improvement of the main disease. The psychological problems and the psychological state of the patient will probably affect his cure or his improvements and his response to the medications he's taking and to the management he's going through for the treatment of his main organic issue, organic disease. So if we ignored it and if we didn't focus on the psychological aspect and the psychological state of the patient, it will affect in turn the overall improvement rate of the patient.
What about the patient's loved ones and family members? To what extent they should get psychological support in order to face all the pressures that they are falling under because of their loved one getting ill or maybe in a critical condition? It's quite tough.
Yes. Any patient suffering from mainly the chronic disease, his family and loved ones will be affected psychologically by his disability or by his disease. Sorry. That means that we have to deal with the patient and his family and all his family members, especially his spouse, his parents, his children, yes, of course, because it will affect them psychologically. We have to teach them and educate them about the disease itself and how it affects the patient, and how they can deal with the patient and how they can deal with themselves to cope with the new condition they are all suffering from at home.
Now we'll take this report about the psychological impact of the diseases on the patient and his family members with Samah Sharif, and after that we'll be back to resume our interview with Dr. Yasser.
Clinic, many people who go through traumatic events have difficulty adjusting and coping for a while, but they do not have PTSD. With time and good self-care, they usually get better. But if the symptoms get worse or last for months or even years and interfere with your functioning, you may have PTSD. Getting effective treatment after PTSD symptoms develop can be critical to reduce symptoms and improve function. Post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms may start within 3 months of a traumatic event, but sometimes symptoms may not appear until years after the event. These symptoms cause significant problems in social or work situations and in relationships. PTSD symptoms are generally grouped into 4 types: intrusive memories, avoidance, negative changes in thinking, and mood or changes in emotional reactions. Symptoms of intrusive memories may include recurrent unwanted distressing memories of the traumatic event, reliving the traumatic event as if it were happening again, like flashbacks, upsetting dreams about the traumatic event, and severe emotional distress or physical reactions to something that reminds you of the event. As for avoidance symptoms, they may include trying to avoid thinking or talking about the traumatic event, or avoiding places, activities, or people that remind you of the traumatic event. Symptoms of negative changes in thinking and mood may include negative feelings about yourself or other people, inability to experience positive emotions, feeling emotionally numb, lack of interest in activities you once enjoyed, hopelessness about the future, memory problems including not remembering important aspects of the traumatic event, and difficulty maintaining close relationships. PTSD symptoms can vary in intensity over time. You may have more PTSD symptoms when you're stressed in general, or when you run into reminders of what you went through. If you have disturbing thoughts and feelings about a traumatic event for more than a month, if they're severe, or if you feel you're having trouble getting your life back under control, talk to a healthcare professional. Get treatment as soon as possible to help prevent PTSD symptoms from getting worse.
Welcome back, our dear viewers. We continue our interview with Dr. Yasser Yusri. Dr. Yasser, to what extent sometimes ignoring the problems, the psychological problems of the patient could lead to more negative repercussions on his health condition?
Yes, as I said before, it will affect the improvement and the time.
There is a clear link here between the psychological and physical
yes,
condition of the person.
There is a clear link between the central nervous system and all the body organs. So when any body organ is affected by any disease, it will be affected by the psychological factor, because the psychological factor will affect the nerve impulses going through the nerves that supply that organ, and it will delay the recovery and will delay the improvement and the response to the treatment itself. And maybe it will affect negatively the organ itself by increasing the disease and increasing the symptoms and making the patient feel the symptoms more than normal. Maybe any disease giving a certain amount of pain. When the person is depressed, he will feel more pain, more than the investigations, how the investigations will appear, and the imaging appearing to affect the pain receptors in the body. So he'll feel more pain, he will complain more, and anybody can dismiss or ignore the effect of the psychological factor upon his condition.
Indeed. And we are now joined over the phone by Dr. Mohammed Adib to shed more light on the issue. Dr. Mohammed.
Yes, hello, how are you?
Hello, sir, how are you? Sir, we are talking about the way how doctors should deal with the psychological repercussions of the diseases on a patient.
Yes, actually, in the chronic diseases, or as our professor he said about there is any disease which it is associated with the pain, and there will be some sort of disability. So teamwork is very important, and if I'm an orthopedic consultant, and if there is any disease which it is maybe lead to handicap, the psychology and the psychiatrical aspect of the patient is very, very high important. And I'm telling you, actually, the teamwork, which it is formed of the treating doctor and the psychiatrist and the social officer and the members of the family, they are very important to complete our medical service.
Sir, and are we talking here that mainly the psychological impact would be in the chronic diseases, or maybe some patients could have psychological problems because of the feeling of pain, or the fact that he is not accepting the fact that he is ill or he is sick?
Yes, actually, I'll tell you an example. A patient who has a cancer. The problem of this cancer is usually associated with the psychiatrical problem, as a depression and delusion and irritability. We cannot give a medical treatment only. We must give the medical treatment and psychiatrical support for the patient to continue his treatment safely.
Indeed, Dr. Mohammed Adib, thank you very much, sir, for your input. And back to our dear guest, Dr. Yasser. Dr. Yasser, Dr. Mohammed was talking about the cancer patients. Of course, cancer is one of the most threatening diseases, one of the diseases that could have the most severe psychological repercussions on the patient and his own family.
Yes, of course.
The cancer is not only fatal, sometimes to a great extent, a high number of fatalities is occurring because of cancer, but it is associated with pain. Of course, the chemotherapy is quite difficult for the patient and his loved ones. And the fact that there are some changes which occur also on the patient outside and inside because of the chemotherapy.
Yes.
So I do believe that the cancer is one of the diseases which has a tremendous psychological repercussion on the patient. So how the patient should accept that, because also the patient sometimes they do not accept the fact that they are having cancer as well.
Yes.
So
they may deny the fact that they suffer from cancer, from that fatal disease at the start. Yes. First of all, we have to consider adding in the management team a psychiatrist when we diagnose a patient with cancer. There should be a psychiatrist in the managing team work, so that he can deal with the patient and we can transform the patient from the denial state of having that kind of disease, of chronic disease, and accepting the fact that he's ill and he's going through kinds of therapy that would have an impact and side effects which will affect his body, all his body and his performance and his image.
Because cancer, of course, because of the chemotherapy, is having a severe repercussion on the
skin and the hair and
the outside appearance.
Yes, yes, and he will have comments from his peers about his image and his physical appearance.
Difficult.
Yes, yes, it is difficult, and it is a very source of stress put upon the patient, and it will affect the recovery of the patient and his response to the chemotherapy itself. If he's not well assessed for the psychiatric condition and treated well by a professional psychiatrist or psychologist.
But don't you think, Dr. Yasser, that the pain here and the condition in which the patient is in, because of all the pain, because of his appearance which has changed all of a sudden, sometimes very, very hurtful and stressful thoughts do come to the mind of the patient here. Why this is happening to me? How can I face the society? I'm in severe pain. He's not accepting that, even if he's accepting that he's having cancer, but he's not able to tolerate all the pain of the treatment, the chemotherapy, which is quite painful, the change in his appearance, sometimes the weakness. It's quite difficult, actually.
Yes, that's why we sometimes we have to add some kinds of antidepressants and medications, psychiatric medications, to that patient, so that he can be able to...
Because only talking to him, I believe, in that condition could not be enough.
Some conditions it will not be enough, and it will not affect properly or improve the patient's condition. So sometimes we add antidepressants to the patients to be able to get rid of the psychological symptoms he's suffering from because of the cancer itself, and the side effects of the chemotherapy. It may affect his psychological state. He may develop depression after having the chemotherapy, not after hearing that he's suffering from cancer itself. So we have to make a proper assessment for the patient so that we can tell if he's in need of medications or only psychotherapy sessions.
What about also how the family members should deal with the patient and how they should be dealt with? Because here they are torn apart. They have to show strength.
Yes.
To support the loved one who is suffering from disease. And on the other side, they are so stressed, they are so hurt, because they are seeing, of course, the patient, the family member who they love, suffering a lot. So
yes,
it's a very tough equation.
Difficult issue, yes. Sometimes the family members themselves will suffer from depression themselves. They will be affected, and they will have depression, and they will have to deal with the psychiatrist so that he can manage those kind of issues before it is going to be complicated when the patient condition may be deteriorated after having the chemotherapy, or if the cancer stage is in a late stage. And other aspects we have to deal with the family members is how to deal with the patient himself, because sometimes when the family members will take more care for the patient and their way of dealing with the patient, it will affect the patient negatively, because he will think that he's disabled and debilitated, and he's not...
it's quite a tough feeling to feel that you are not able to...
Take care of yourself.
To move around anymore. You are dependent on others.
So if he may think that others are dealing with him as if he's handicapped, so it will affect him negatively. So we have to be very cautious when dealing with the cancer patient, and how to deal with him, how to talk to him, and how to discuss with him the physical illness that he's suffering from and the future he's going through. So it will be the family education and family therapy, not only to the patient.
Studies showed that it can be difficult to diagnose depression in a medically ill person. To what extent that's true?
Yes, it's true. Sometimes it's true because some physicians will refer to the sufferings and pain of the patient because of the disease itself, and will not take into account any the psychological aspect of the patient. They may think that it is normal for the patient to be depressed and to have a depressed mood and mood swings during his illness, and he will not put into consideration any kind of psychological issues that may affect the overall health of the patient and his condition, and he will not consider that it may affect the response of the patient to the treatment itself. The patient may be not responding well to the treatment, to the medications, and we will postpone, and some physicians will postpone the treatment or increase the doses of the medications so that he may improve more than before, and they will ignore the psychological aspect affecting the response of the patient to the medications.
Dr. Yasser, how beneficial is it a group therapy for the people who are suffering from chronic diseases? Because we do watch in the American movies or foreign movies that any cancer patient or a patient with chronic diseases do get together, they share their experience, they can talk. So how the group therapy could help in such cases?
Yes, in some cases it will be beneficial to go through the group therapy, group psychotherapy, because as you said, the patient will be able to share his experience and will be able to listen to others' experiences who suffer from the same organic disease. He will think that, or he will know that he's not alone in this community suffering from that kind of pain and that kind of issues and that kind of
to share the painful experience.
Yes, it will affect him in a positive way. And he will ventilate or get rid of the negative emotions inside himself.
That would bring me, Dr. Yasser, to ask you, what about getting rid of the negative energy? Because, of course, the patient, the family of the patient, most people now somehow are suffering from some psychological problem and negative energy. We could feel the negative vibes in many people, or most of the people, unfortunately. So how can we handle these negative vibes, and how can we work on ourselves, either patients, either family of patients, or even the cured or normal people, how they should work on themselves to change their way of thinking in order to try to get more positive vibes here?
Yes. First of all, the negative energy or the negative emotions is a reaction to the thoughts, to the negative thoughts. So we have first to deal with the negative thoughts.
How?
We have to control the negative thoughts.
Because most of the people, the doctor that I interview or the life coach or whoever comes, they talk about brain coaching, and we have to think positively. It's very difficult, believe me, Dr.
Yes, yes,
so give us some tips, because it's quite difficult to do that.
Yes, it is a kind of habit. When we have or we continue doing something, like the thoughts we used to think in a certain way, it is turned into a habit that the brain is used to do while we are not making any effort to think negatively. But while we are sitting still, we will think, or the brain will get a negative thought at instance. So we have to change that habit by doing regular exercises daily into the positive thinking issues, so that the brain will develop new neurons and new interneuronal connections concerning the positive thoughts. So it is a kind of exercise like the physical exercise we are doing. We have daily to get rid of the negative thoughts, not by reinforcing any kind of thoughts or by resisting the negative thoughts, but by trying to focus on any positive thing and trying to make any positive activities like sports, like doing a hobby all over the day, like indulging in social activities, in a positive social activities with our peers and friends, and not talking about any negative feelings about ourselves. On the other hand, we talk about the positive feelings and how we develop ourselves positively, so that we can make a habit and develop our brain positively.
Indeed. Dr. Yasser, what are most of the diseases which are somehow linked to psychological problems or psychological repercussions?
The kind of diseases? Like we said at the beginning, the cancer is the most difficult condition that almost all the patients will suffer from psychological and psychiatric issues. And we have the diabetes, The diabetic patients usually develop...
Because he has to change his lifestyle as well.
Lifestyle, and the glucose levels in the blood will affect his mental condition, so it will affect his psychological condition as well. And some kind of, they will develop depression. Most or a great number of patients suffering from diabetes will suffer from depression and will have to take antidepressants. And the hypoglycemia, the decreased levels of glucose in the blood itself, may trigger some kind of panic attacks. If the patient is susceptible to having panic attacks, it will get symptoms that look like panic attacks, so he may continue having panic attacks despite having normal blood sugar. Other conditions, the musculoskeletal... Is it
psychological here, these panic attacks?
It will start, it may start by organic cause, the hypoglycemia, the decreased blood glucose, and it may trigger the psychological panic attack later on.
Can you tell us more about these panic attacks? Are they mainly, but we can continue the diseases. Why do we get these panic attacks? But first we will continue the diseases other than the diabetes and cancer.
Okay, the musculoskeletal diseases like the osteoarthritis and the rheumatoid arthritis, the patients suffering from any musculoskeletal disease, they will suffer from psychological issues, especially depression, because they will not be do the normal routine life work. They will have to depend on others in performing such activities. So they'll have depression. They will not be able to walk or to do sports or to go through any kind of long-term and long ways travel because of their, for example, back issues and their knee issues. Other skin or sensitivity reactions like the skin issues and the bronchial asthma, the respiratory conditions that will be triggered by the psychological issue, and it will, the patient will get lately depression because of his asthma. He will be afraid of going through specific situations because he's afraid of having another attack of asthma.
Indeed. Unfortunately, we did run out of time, but maybe we will have another episode to talk about the problems, the psychological problems and the panic attacks. Dr. Yasser Yusri, a psychiatrist, thank you very much for being our guest for today.
Thank you.
And with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition of Body and Soul. I'm Aisty Rabia, signing off.